All right, team, welcome back. It is week 10. It is getting so close now to the end. It's time to start bringing things together, looking at a couple more concepts. So let's begin. You're with me, Coach Chicken Legs. So I should have now a bunch of people with very clean cupboards and very clean fridges from last week. They may not be very happy with me, but I would like to know that they have completed that task and hopefully feel better for it. We should also now have a better understanding of who we are and what we're trying to achieve. We should have a better understanding of positive thinking and growth mindset. You should have a better understanding of who you are and what that means. So when it comes to nutritional decisions, you can stand strong at knowing exactly what you're about. You should have a good recap on carbs, understanding that a little bit better as well. You should have a lovely printout of a shopping list. You should also have a sheet, that's your checklist, that's getting close, if not is 90% accurate every day of the week. So team, now we're gonna start looking at some more global, interesting ideas. So when we're talking about health, fitness, and longevity, we are always gonna factor in 5 things. So this week, you're gonna test these 5 things every morning and every evening. That way we can see if there's any health trends or things that you need to work on. But before I work out and whilst I'm going through my nutritional programs, I always think about these 5 things because they will help determine which direction I'm traveling, either towards my goal or towards injury and not achieving my goal. So the 5 things we're gonna discuss is your sleep, your water, your nutrition, your movement, and your emotion. So these 5 things come under the bracket of readiness. So when I'm talking about readiness, I'm referring to these 3 things. So when you're measuring your readiness, you always measure it out of 3. 3 is the best you've ever had ever. It is really, really, really good. And 0 is the worst. You've never been any worse than that in this moment. 0, bad. 3, good. So let's talk about sleep first. So sleep is very, very important. So as we discussed in previous weeks, team, as we move around and metabolic waste happens within our body, so we get a buildup of adenosine in our body, as well as melatonin. And these are responsible for making us feel sleepy. To wake us up, cortisol starts building up to awaken us. Cold temperatures makes us sleepy, warm temperatures make us awake, because our body follows the sun's cycle. As the sun rises and the temperature around us heats up, it triggers us to wake back up. As the world gets colder, as the sun leaves us, that triggers us to go back to sleep. Same is true with the amount of light that we absorb. So as stuff gets darker, we find ourselves getting tired, and as stuff gets brighter, we find ourselves getting more awake. This might be one of the issues you run into with modern technology, is that since we have constant access to bright lights, both in our homes and on our phones, it can sometimes upset how our sleep cycle, because we think it's brighter than it is, and we haven't had time to build up the melatonin and adenosine in our brains to make us feel sleepy. So if you want better sleep, usually you'd want to restrict the amount of light that you're allowing into your eye, as well as manipulate and control the temperature of whatever room it is you sleep in. So dark, cold rooms will make you sleep better than light, hot rooms. They say that the best sleeping temperature is around 18 degrees. You can cheat this system a little bit by having a hot shower. So when you step out of the shower, your core body temperature plummets. So it makes you tired quickly. But the same is true if I want to have a burst of energy. I'll have a very, very cold shower that when I step out of the room, it'll spike my body temperature up, which will make me feel more alert. We're always aiming for between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night. We want to clean away all the buildup of chemicals that happens within our body through our sleep. Most of that will happen after the 6-hour mark. Every minute after your 6 hours of unbroken sleep, we start eating away at some of the buildup chemicals that are within us. Some people believe that they can function with less than 6 hours sleep a day. And although you can do that on occasion, it's not necessarily promotive for you long term. One of the phrases we've coined here is called sleep tax. Sleep can sometimes work like a bank. Our bank will let us take a loan of up to 50 hours of sleep tax. So what does that mean? Well, it means if I'm someone who needs to have 7 hours of sleep a night, for my body to function properly. And that will vary depending who you are. There's some populace who can run on exactly 6, and that's more than enough for them. There are some people who need up to 10. Think about a teenager who's growing. They will need more sleep than someone who's already fully developed. That will depend on your biology. But for you, let's say you need exactly 7 to 8 hours a night. If for some reason you had a late night or something occurred that restricted your ability to get sleep and you lost 1 hour of your 8 hours, you now owe the bank 1 hour of extra sleep. Now, your bank will give you a loan up to 50 hours. So if I have consistent nights of poor sleep, I can get as far down as owing the bank 50 hours before it just caps me out. So it's not an infinite build-up. You can't have hundreds of thousands of hours of sleep debt. It caps out about 50. Now, every hour that I sneak in a nap or get extra amount of sleep than the amount I would standardly have, I knock off some of my debt. So if I owe the bank 2 hours of sleep because I had a poor night's sleep, but then I sleep in 2 hours, I will find that I will knock away at my sleep debt and will be back to neutral. The more sleep debt you accrue, the more fatigued you'll feel throughout the day. So if you're finding that you're exhausted even after one good night of sleep, you might have accrued a lot of sleep debt over your life and need to make an effort to try to increase the amount of sleep that you are getting to pay back the bank. A good way to test if you're in sleep debt is that if you're finding yourself fatigued between the hours of 1 o'clock and about 4 o'clock, you may be in sleep debt. You could have a buildup of receptors from caffeine addiction, which we've discussed previously, where you might also just be in a large amount of sleep debt for some people who might find that they don't have the capacity to sleep well and regularly. So in the morning, I might assess, how did I sleep out of 3? If I feel well rested, if I feel like I don't have any sleep debt, or I feel energetic, I might give myself a big 3. I feel really good, best sleep I've ever had. But if I'm feeling very lethargic, if I needed my alarm to wake me up more than once, that might indicate that I've got poor sleep last night. So I want you to give yourself a marking out of 3. How well did you sleep? It might be 2. I slept okay, but not amazingly. I feel rested, but I could definitely use some more sleep. So that's that 1 to 2 range. Now we're going to talk about our water. We've discussed water in previous videos, so we'll briefly touch on it. Remember that water is important for our muscle fluidity. It's important for breaking down all the chemical reactions in your body. It's important to help prevent injury. It helps us keep mentally sharp. It's very, very important. And we know we're always trying to aim for about 3 liters of drunken water and 1 liter of eaten water through our vegetables and whole foods. So I want you to think today, how much water have you had? If it's an early morning, how much water did you have yesterday and this morning? Do you feel hydrated? And a good test is, what color is my urine? The clearer the urine, the more hydrated I am. Rank yourself from 0 to 3. 0 is you're very dehydrated, and 3 is you don't feel dehydrated at all, you feel great, and your urine is clear. So let's say you're 3. You've smashed that, you're feeling very good, you've had your 3 liters, happy days. Next, we look at our nutrition. So now you are an expert in this area. You're very well educated in this area. Well, most people would just say, yeah, I feel like I've been eating well. You know to go, well, have I had my servings of protein today? Have I had my 5 colors of vegetables? Have I been balancing my fats? Have I been having a diversity of carbohydrates? Have I been eating calorie rich, calorie poor, nutritionally rich, or nutritionally poor foods? So you're far more aware if your nutrition is on the upward trend or not. If you're eating more whole foods or more processed foods. Are you feeling more inflamed? Have you had your fish oils? This is something that you can mark yourself better than anyone at the moment. So you want to see, have you been keeping true to your nutrition? Are you at a 3 today? Are you being very, very consistent at 90% with your nutrition? Or have we slipped a little bit of late? Okay. So you might mark yourself down as a 1 or a 2, ideally for us a 3. Your movement is the next thing we're going to discuss. When we talk about movement, we talk about any kind of discomfort. So if I was to drop my keys, am I sore trying to pick up those keys? I'm thinking about my flexibility. Do I feel like I'm flexible? Do I feel like I'm training the appropriate amount? We know, because you've done this nutrition course, that I'm thinking about how many steps I'm doing in a day, my NEAT training. We are thinking about a lot more because we've done this nutritional program, okay? So your steps, how well have you been moving? Have you been shifting? Are you in any discomfort? Are you following a program? How well do you feel? The main one I always ask people is, do you have any niggles, any discomforts, or any restrictions that are stopping you from doing good movement today? You might be working at the office at the minute, you're a little bit of a sore back, but it is on the upward trend. So mark yourself out of 3. How well do you feel? And finally, we talk about emotion. We talk about our mental stress levels, our relationships, how well we feel, our support networks. That is all emotion. In life, stress is very, very useful. If there were to be a tiger that jump out right now and try to maul me, you best believe that I need to be stressed to be able to get away from it as quickly as I can. However, I don't need that stress all the time. So we might have a tiger jump out at us, and that will cause a natural, healthy amount of stress to enter our body to get us out of that situation to survive. However, we're not in a position anymore where those kind of threats exist as much. So we can sometimes become stressed for stimulants that we usually wouldn't. So we could just live a very high stress job. We might have high stress in traffic. We could have stuff that's affecting us and weighing on our shoulders in our home and social lives. These are things I want you to consider. So 3 is that you are stress-free. You feel groovy. You feel really good. And 0 is you are incredibly stressed. You feel very, very stressed indeed. I want you to give yourself a mark out of 3 of how you feel. It might be a 2. You're not overly stressed, but you could definitely be better. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But this is how we measure our 5 tools of readiness. And these are very important because we're going to do this of every morning and every evening before we go to bed. Now, why do we track our readiness? Why do we track it for our performance? Why do we track it for our health? Because our readiness will help us determine what we need to work on, and also it will tell us if we're overdoing it. If our readiness over the period of a month isn't always trending up or stay neutral in the high levels, we may need to adjust our attack of how we're doing our fitness and nutrition. So for example, if you've had a day where you were a 10, and then you went to 8, and then 6, and then 7, and then 5, and then 8, and then 4, and then 3, and then 3, and then 3, whatever's happening in your life between your sleep, your water, your nutrition, your movement, and your emotion might need to be reshuffled and rebalanced to make sure you're always back on the upward trend. As 1 or 2 things start to drop, everything else seems to follow with it. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you might find that your stress levels are easier to spike. You might find that your movement is then restricted because of the higher stress levels and the lack of sleep. And because your movement's restricted, you're not able to train as much, which means you don't have as much of an appetite, which means your nutrition drops. So things like this, they all chain together. The good news is we can use readiness to manipulate our space. If I've just had a kid and I know for the next couple of months I'm going to be very sleep deprived, I can focus heavily on my water, my nutrition, my movement, and my stress to keep those 3 out of 3. So even if my sleep is 0, I can still have 12 out of 15 days, which means I can still progress through my nutrition. Very useful. So as something drops, we can start tailoring everything else up to help you stay consistent throughout this process. Team, our readiness is also affected by which state we are in. There are 2 states we have within our nervous system: sympathetic, which is our fight, flight, freeze, or response, and our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest response. So your body will switch you between the 2 as a task is needed. If I'm about to train and I need to be woken up or I need to be excited, our body will start becoming sympathetic, where it's ready to fight, it's ready to flight, it's ready to freeze, or ready for These are things that excite you, get your heart rate up, release more cortisol, release more adrenaline, gets you going. Very, very relevant and very, very helpful when we need to be in that state of being. This is where all of our movements can occur. This is where we can start stimulating growth and change and weight loss. When we're in a parasympathetic state, that's rest and digest. That's low heart rate, the feeling of sleepiness, this feeling of comfort. This is when all of our heightened modes are low and relaxed. This is fantastic for when we're trying to stay a cool head and we want to grow or heal. So as this space helps us burn calories and tear muscle mass, this helps us burn away the fats and build up the muscle. This is where we want to live most of the time. This is very, very useful for help us with recovery. We use this space to get us going and this space to relax us again. Very important, the yin to the yang. So sometimes we might find that we are in a parasympathetic state when we wake up. We feel lethargic, we feel tired, but we looked at our readiness and our water, our movement, our nutrition and our stress is actually quite good. We're just fatigued, tired. So we can introduce stimulants into this space like caffeine to help bring us back into a sympathetic state. If we're in a parasympathetic state, like at a workout, but we want to be sympathetic, we can start introducing things like stimulants. If we're in a sympathetic state, so we're heightened, but it's not appropriate, we can bring ourselves back down to a parasympathetic state. So although this is very, very useful if we were to be in a fight or we're running away from a tiger, it's not very useful when we're trying to buy groceries for the week at the shops. It's not very useful when we're with our partners trying to relax in an afternoon. So you can tell where you are in your state of being by using your breath work. If you struggle to inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds, you might be trending more towards a sympathetic state of being, a fight and flight state of being. If you find that's quite easy to do, you might be in a more parasympathetic state of being. Okay? So we can check with our breath. We can try to inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and breathe out for 8 seconds. And that will kind of tell you where you're sitting. If it's quite easy, we're in our rest and digest state. If that's quite hard, you're in your sympathetic state. Use that breath work and use your readiness to determine where you are, and that will just give you more insight of what's going on within you in any particular moment. Very useful to know. A good insight to why you might feel very heightened in times it's not appropriate, or you might feel very, very lethargic in times it's not appropriate. So use your readiness and use your understanding of these two things to track where you are during the day. So team, this week, the challenge I want you to do is every morning you're going to do your readiness. You're going to, out of 3, 0 being the worst, 3 being the best, you're going to see where you are for all 5 of the readiness markers. Then in the evening, you're going to do the same thing. This will give you a good idea if you're sympathetic or parasympathetic, and it will give us a good idea if you're trending up in your health or we're trending down in our health. So let's again address one of the things we've talked about previously. We've already talked about our proteins and our carbs. Let's quickly readdress our vegetables, remembering that there's 5 colors of vegetables. There's white vegetables, orange vegetables, red vegetables, green vegetables, and purple vegetables. Vegetables are very good for your gut biome, they're very good for water retention, and they're very good at getting your micronutrients. We've also previously talked about fats. So your fats are broken down into 4 things: your saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and our trans fats. Remember that fats are incredible at creating energy. They're good at creating inflammation in the body, and they're good at creating anti-inflammation. So team, I have some homework for you. Next week, we are going to recap everything we've discussed. So this week, you have every single thing that we ever need to look at in this nutritional program. This week's checklist has everything I want you to be considering. We will be adding no more. That's it. You did it. This week, we're going to do every single thing. Next week, we're going to recap the whole program. We're going to go through everything. And I want you to go along with me. Look over videos on the ones that you're struggling with, any of the concepts that you're struggling with, because I'm going to ask you and discuss with you things and challenges that you might have found along the way. And we're going to discuss what I would expect the bare minimum of retention to be on each of the topics. And from there, you're going to try to do all this week again. You're going to try to do a week of every single thing. You're going to be your own coach for a week. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to see how much you've retained, and it's going to show us what we need to work on. So I do suggest you look over any of the videos you struggled with and prepare for next week. It's not a test. It's not an exam. It's just to give you an insight of how much stuff you've retained. I need you to fill out everything on your checklist this week. This is one of the only weeks that you get a chance of doing everything. Good luck, have fun, and I'll see you next week for your test/revision.